Hello, my friends. I'm gonna take you on a little ride with me today. I'm gonna make a couple points that I always like to make. We're on the side of the road, not too far from the house. That's the grass, and on the other side of that knob, there's the ditch, and that ditch is uplands to my creek, and then over there, there's a soybean field that's covered, that's dead ground, utterly lifeless, covered with snow. And the reason I'm showing you that partly is just to point out that you can see it. We're your head's about the same height as mine, the way I've got my tripod arranged. I'm pretty sure that you'll be hearing various noises, engine noises and rumbles and stuff, and I can't fix that. But if we walked from here, you could see that much detail all the way. You would see everything. You know, there's some birds over there, but we're not going to walk. We're going to drive, and as you know, it's not a theory. It's pretty much a known fact that the faster you go, the more you miss, and we don't know that as a culture, and that's why we think we're so knowledgeable when mostly we're just ignorant. So I want you to just watch this stuff. Watch those blades of grass and those sticks as we accelerate away, and I'll tell you the story as we go. "12 miles an hour. How much detail do you see?" Up to 16 now. And 20. And I kick in the automatic pilot, and the automatic pilot's lowest possible speed is 25. So we'll be going 25 from here on out till we hit pavement. And we're going into the bowels of the beast. We're going to leave the far back where I live and where my stories take place, and we're going to go out into the full-blown 21st century. I'm going down to Columbia, Missouri, where the University of Missouri's main campus is, and tomorrow I'm going to attend a day-long seminar on agroforestry, which is comes under the heading of learning more about my profession, my job, and but I'm going to talk about the ride in a little bit. Guys, cows over there, you see they're turning that pasture into a mudslally. It's cows aren't really designed to stay in one place for long periods of time. Cows and fences were not invented by the same mind. Cows were invented by evolution, by the sense of the universe, the logic and mind of the universe, which does everything right. And fences were invented by European humans, and I can't say we do everything wrong, but I can say that we're approaching it. So this puts us on Highway 10. This is what's known in rural America as a two-lane blacktop. Two-lane blacktops come in two flavors. The good ones have wide shoulders, and the next lower level have almost no shoulder to no shoulder. This is a good one. It's a relatively new highway. I'm new by my standards, which is to say I'm an old geezer, and they built this while I was already an old geezer, so whatever that constitutes, I don't know. We're going 50 now, and I don't know how your perception of the details is, but but I'm suspecting that you're not seeing quite as much detail. And the reason this matters, the reason that lack of detail matters, is because most of what's wrong with the ecosystem, which we typically like to call climate change, even though that's a drastic oversimplification of the whole problem. Most of what's wrong with the ecosystem is hard to see out a car window, impossible to see out a jet window, very difficult to see out an office window. Really, the only way to see it and see it well is at a walking pace. And so the people that we're counting on to find us the solution can't see the problem because they never walk anywhere. I mean, they walk from the TV to the bathroom, and they walk from the refrigerator to the stove, but they don't walk, across half a mile of wet dirt, and they certainly don't walk across a wide range of the prairie. And so it's easy to say, well, the scientists said that the temperature has gone up by a degree and a quarter, a degree and a half, whatever the current number is, and therefore we know that must be what's causing all the mass extinction. But of course it's not, because the mass extinction was happening before the temperature rose. And while consecutive correlation does not prove causation, we are reasonably sure in all circumstances that things are not caused by events which occur after them. So since the mass extinction was already happening before climate change came along, well, we can be reasonably sure that that's not what's causing it. And desertification, of course, has been going on and is documented to have been going on for at least 6,000 years. So we can be pretty sure climate change didn't cause that. But the more you reduce your image of your environment to a blur, the easier it is to accept what someone else tells you. And I don't think people are lying to you. I think Michael Mann is probably as honest and as straightforward and as decent a man as there exists. Michael Mann's a climate scientist, and he can look around and he can tell you without question that what we have done here is creating havoc with our climate. And the only thing wrong with that is the reductionist nature of his education, which teaches him everything you could possibly know about as small a thing as you could possibly imagine, but it doesn't place it within a broader context. And so he is able to tell you in good faith, as honestly as a man can speak, that we've got to reduce our carbon emissions, and he's absolutely right about that. But he makes a correlation to that we only have to reduce our carbon emissions, and that is unfortunately false. He is a classic example of a man whose only tool is a hammer. His only tool, his whole life, is climate science, and everything he sees looks like climate change. And he sees climate change as caused by excess carbon in the atmosphere, and he sees the source of the excess carbon in the atmosphere as being fossil fuels. And all that is true as far as it goes, but unfortunately it doesn't go far enough, because much of the excess carbon in the atmosphere comes from sources other than fossil fuels. Farmland, naked farmland, is a huge source of excess carbon in the atmosphere, and drained marshes and drained swamps are a huge source of excess carbon. Not only carbon dioxide, but also the methane, the accursed methane. Here we have the core and center of Richmond's economy. Richmond used to be a town with a square, and the square was full of stores, and each store was owned by a family, and each family earned a living out of their stores. And now Richmond is a town with a Walmart on the edge of town. The Walmart used to be on a different road, but they built this road, and one of the laws of Walmart is that the newest road, the biggest road, the road that carries the most traffic is the only road worth being on. So one of the characteristics of small town Missouri is not only the Walmart, but also another thing called the old Walmart, which is usually dead. Now, we're on Missouri 13 headed south out of Richmond towards Missouri River and Lexington. And this is a very new stretch of road. This is 4-lane divided. The speed limit's 70. I'm choosing out here to go 60 because I emit less carbon at 60 miles per hour. I emit less carbon per mile at 60 than I do at 70. And since this is a 4-lane divided, I can go 60 without holding up other people. If I'm on a 2-lane blacktop, then I go whatever the speed limit is, which still holds up everybody because everybody wants to go faster than the speed limit. In America, there's a kind of an unspoken agreement that the normal speed is the speed limit plus 5. And so even on 2-lane blacktops, I'm like a rolling traffic obstruction. But I'm willing to go the speed limit to play along with my fellow Americans, but I'm not willing to speed just because everybody else does. Because I'm constantly aware of the fact that the faster you go, the more carbon you emit per mile. And I don't care what you drive, that is a fact of science. So I got all the time in the world to get where I'm going. This seminar that I'm going to attend is tomorrow, and I've chosen to drive down here tonight because I just hate to hurry. It's about 2 hours from home to Columbia, and the seminar is supposed to start at 8. So I could get up, be out the door at 6 o'clock, and if I didn't miss a lick, I could probably be there by 8, assuming the interstate freeway didn't break. But the fact is that I would feel stressed. I would feel like I was under pressure. And so for 50 or 60 bucks, I booked a room in a little motel near the university where I could stay tonight, so I could just poke along down here, make an easy trip of it, spend one night in a motel. She's taking care of Chica, and she's going to take care of Abe and Patches and the chickens, so that I can be gone from my responsibilities, and she's going to take care of the bird feeders and wild birds. If you look out here, you see that we're in one of these agricultural deserts. I know it's a blur, but you can still tell it's out there, and that's a big cause right there of mass extinction in America. Over 50% of the continental United States land surface looks like that now. It's dead. There's no life on it. There's no cover on it. There's no food on it. There's no significant amounts of open water on it. It's just dead. And so if the continental United States could hold X number of total wildlife, then the continental United States, when it's half of it is dead, can hold X divided by 2. So we've cut down just simply by this system of agriculture, we've essentially cut down the wildlife in the United States by 50%. That's where half, since I was 21, just in that short time, over half of all the wildlife that lived in the United States when I turned 21 no longer exists. There's a combination. We have both species loss, whole species have passed into extinction, and we also have population reduction, so that while the species still exists, it's only half as big as it used to be. And so this by itself accounts for half of all the wildlife loss. If you went around the United States and you bulldozed half the houses, the odds are that a lot of people would die, because it's real cold out here right now, and if you didn't have a house, somebody came and bulldozed your house, and there was no other ones. All the other houses were already occupied, and there was no room for you to come live in them. Well, a lot of people would die. And that's what happens, when you do this, when you create these deserts, is that a lot of people die. All of what we're in now really should be running with side channels and rivulets, and that right there, that's a frozen wetland marsh. But this whole bottom should be side channels and rivulets and pieces of the Missouri River, and then it would also in between the Missouri River would be largely cottonwood forests, not entirely, but a lot of oak and trees that grow well in wet feet. There'd be a lot of walnut down here, and that would be, if we hadn't, that's what it was like before they came down here with the horse-drawn agriculture and started plowing this up. So this utter disaster we're looking at is made much worse by big tractors and tractors at all. But it was already a disaster when we were farming with horses, because we took this river. This river should be a mile wide, and it's a few hundred yards wide. That's the Missouri River, the longest river on the continental United States. Yes, it's longer than the Mississippi. Yes, it's longer than the Ohio. That's the longest river in the continental United States. And it used to be essentially a long, narrow, it was kind of like the Everglades, almost like the Everglades. Not a river of grass, but a river of mud and sandbars and cottonwood forests. And it was a wide, shallow. Mark Twain, who was the river captain on the Missouri, said that driving a steamboat up the Missouri was like following a small boy with a watering can across the prairie. There was a lot of water out there, but it was spread wide and thin and not very deep, and there were lots of places where a horse or an ox could walk across that river. There are none now, between whatever that city is up there in Nebraska. My words just escape me from time to time. But from there down to here, the channelized part, the lower several hundred miles is channelized. It's like that. It's forced into a narrow stream. Now you see here that the speed limit's about to drop to 60 miles an hour. Had I accelerated up to 70 at Richmond, I could have gone from there to here at 70, and now I would have to drop back down to 60. I would have wasted the fuel to accelerate up to 70. I would have wasted the fuel to maintain the speed of 70, which would have been a smaller amount of waste than the acceleration waste. And then for most people, when they reach that 60 mile an hour sign, are going to push their brakes to take off the additional speed. A few will just lift their foot off the throttle, but most will brake. And what brakes do is they convert gasoline to heat in your brake discs and dissipate it into the atmosphere. So when you do that, you're literally buying gasoline for the express and sole purpose of heating your discs. That's how the energy, you've taken the gasoline, you've converted it to heat, you've run the heat through your motor, and about a quarter of that heat has caused motion, and the other 3/4 of the heat is mostly just wasted. You get to grab a little of it to make the interior comfy. I'm sitting in here on this cold winter's day in a work vest, and my coat's wadded up in the seat behind me, so I get some benefit out of that otherwise waste heat. But so that's what we've done. We bought this gasoline for $2.50 a gallon or whatever, and we've converted it to heat. We've used about a quarter of that heat to cause the car to move, and now that energy that was in heat is now kinetic energy in the car. It's expressed in motion, and that's if we run the car into a brick wall, why all the energy is instantly dissipated into the car, and the car can't absorb the energy that fast, and so it flies all to flinders, and the people inside it turn into strawberry jam. But if you do it with your brakes, then you take that heat and you use it you take that kinetic energy and you turn it back into heat, and you heat your disc brakes, your brake discs, or your drums, whichever you have, and then they dissipate that heat into the atmosphere, which adds a trifling amount of additional heat besides what we added by capturing it with our carbon dioxide, although it's trifling, but it's measurable, and since energy never goes away, it can neither be destroyed nor created, that trifling amount does remain there. It's chosen by the science to ignore it, but it's there. How much difference it makes, I have no clue. Michael Mann has told me that it makes very little difference, so little as that it's legitimate to ignore it. Like I said, that is his field, and he's good in it, so I'm inclined to buy his theory. But it's still some. As we travel down through here, this is we're still on Missouri 13. Missouri 13 is a main north-south drag in the middle of the state. It runs through Warrensburg, where Central Missouri State University is. It runs up north. We turned around and went the other way. We get within about 15 miles of the Amish community at Jamesport, which then we'd have to go on to 6 Highway and go over. This road goes through Springfield, Missouri, which is one of the main communities in southern Missouri. So 13's it's a state highway, and it's mostly 2-lane blacktop, but out here it's a major artery. There are no interstates close. The closest interstate west of us is 29 north of Kansas City, and then in Kansas City it changes numbers, and I've forgotten what the new number is because they just built it more recently. But that interstate runs roughly down the route that US 71 used to run down, not exactly. Well, part of it does. The part of it south of Kansas City is on the concrete that used to be called US 71, so that's pretty close. But you see, we're still out here now. This is hill country. It's not way hill country, but it's not bottomland. Missouri's mostly rolling, except right in the river bottoms. And so these cornfields are still essentially dead. Although, if you can see through the blur, there's corn stover, also called corn stalks, about ankle high there on the pasture on our field on our right, and now on the one on our left. This one over here is utterly barren on our right. This is what most of agricultural America looks like today. And I just can't express to you how important that is in terms of population dynamics. because it's all dead. Nothing lives out there. Nothing can live out there. Even over there where that's conservation tillage, where they cut the corn, it's mid-calf high. It's almost knee high. There's still knee-high corn in a monocrop covering several hundred to several thousand acres. Still does not provide a habitat that can support animals. Animals are just like us. They need to be able to get completely out of the weather. I'm running 60 miles an hour on my automatic pilot here, and I've got a pretty good line of traffic piled up behind me. Which things are tough all over. This guy in front of me is not going any faster than I am. Maybe going a tiny bit slower or something. The reason for this, what they call conservation tillage, is to try to cut down the erosion, because every drop of rain that falls on completely bare dirt dissolves that surface soil into particles and carries them away. The energy expressed as speed in the falling rain gets dissipated into in the contact as the droplet flattens out across the soil, and that has energy causes motion, and so that causes that dirt to pick up, and then the rain's not completely out of energy yet, and so it still wants to go downhill, and it does, and that energy carries the soils that it already picked up. This whole process goes on. So all of this, what you're looking at out there, all that corn stover, virtually all of that has lost between 50 and 90% of the topsoil that was on it in 1830 when the European settlers got here with their plows. Depending on how steep it is, a lot of it has lost 90 to 95% of the topsoil, and some of it have lost absolutely all of its topsoil. It's just dead red clay. And that process there, we're told that that process there is one of our problems, our non-carbon dioxide based problems, and that is that the loss of soil, the loss of topsoil, is the first stage, or probably the second stage, of desertification. So this land out here still appears to be fertile ground, but it's essentially halfway to being a desert. The other thing that causes this to be a desert is that those soils out there have very, very, very little what's called organic matter in them. And organic matter is carbon in various forms. And humus, compost, those are all carbon in various forms with other lesser chemicals bound up in them. And biochar, of course, is carbon. These soils, because they've been plowed, and then the CO2 and the living things in them die when they're inverted and exposed to the sun, and then their corpses, which were made out of carbon, dissipate into the atmosphere, and so their carbon becomes atmospheric carbon. And the only thing in soil that absorbs and holds water is carbon. If it's clay soils don't hold much, and sandy soils don't hold much. So unless you have carbon in the soil, you don't hold the water. So since there's not enough carbon in these soils, we can't hold water on the uplands. And so that's the other step in the process of desertification, which is that the water doesn't stay up here. It falls as rain on these soils, but the soils are not able to absorb them. There's no vegetative matter on top of them that's able to absorb them, and so the water just runs off downhill and into the creeks. And then in most cases, and I'll show you that in a different video because we're not going to see that here, in most cases the creeks have been what's called channelized, which means they've been turned from a twisty string of riffles and pools into just a straight ditch, like a pipe with no roof on it. And so that gets the water off even faster and gets it down to the bigger rivers. And then the bigger rivers, like I showed you with the Missouri, have also been channelized, and they've been made narrower and deeper, and the volume of water that runs in them runs more swiftly as a result of that. And so the whole process serves, each step of the process serves to hasten the freshwater's trip to the ocean, where it becomes saltwater. We're entering Higginsville, Missouri. This is one of those do funnies. This part where we are now is Higginsville proper. The city, downtown Higginsville, is not on 13. It's off over to our left, a few blocks. But this is still the outskirts of the city of Higginsville. But you'll see a second spurt of Higginsville, because we're on our way to I-70, which runs east and west across Missouri from Kansas City, St. Louis, runs through Columbia, where I'm going. So that's my quickest route to Columbia and the university. So we're on our way to I-70, and although Higginsville was originally built up here by people who didn't have enough sense to plan for the interstate coming, 120 years later. By the way, see all this farm equipment? Higginsville is the plan, the industrial plan of the United States, which theoretically we don't have a 5-year plan like the old Soviet Union did, but we kind of do. And then the agro-industrial plan of the United States is to have an agri-center about between every 50 to 100 miles, because there aren't enough separate farms with separate owners to provide enough customer base for any more farm supply towns than that. You can't have a little farm supply store in every whistle-stop town where a guy can go and buy corn for his hogs or whatever, and parts for his 8N or anything. So Richmond has one major ag center in it, which is called Ag Power, and it's John Deere, and then it has a what's called a farm supply store that's kind of like a hardware store with some farming stuff in it. And then there's this one at Higginsville, and then the next one in this direction is in Warrensburg, which is another 70 miles or something, I'm not sure. So now we're back out in the country. We've left Higginsville, and we're heading down the road towards I-70, and there's another big cluster. Oh, it says Warrensburg's only 20. There's another big cluster of businesses right there. Of course, they're mostly automobile centered. There's big gas stations with fast food restaurants and junk food and bathrooms and trinkets and crap, stuff for truck drivers. And one of them sells pizza, and the other one's got a Subway in it, and all that stuff. But it's like Higginsville's been pulled in two, and you find this all over rural America, where there's an interstate highway that they built the interstates away from the towns, because the old 2-lane blacktops that were the highways, the U.S. highway structure, went right through the towns, and that annoyed everybody because they had to slow down. So they built the interstates outside the towns. So of course the towns moved there, because you can't have an economy without customers, since in America all of the customers are in cars, you take your business and your attempt to earn a living, and you put it where the most cars go. So it's an ongoing process which consolidates everything onto these strips of concrete. Once we get to I-70 and turn east, then it's just going to be, hell on wheels. I'll be out there with all the semi-trailer trucks and all the idiots. Everybody will want to go 70, and I'll want to go 60, but I probably won't. I'll probably go at least 65, and I may even go 70, because out on I-70, it's pretty dangerous to go much below the speed limit because people have a funny idea about other humans. If both people are wrapped up in rolling steel cocoons, there's no human interaction between them. It's road rage and you son of a bitch. So you can tell from here that we're about to the interstate, can't you? There's the Pilot on the left and the Casey's on the right, and that's it. I don't know what you've got where you live, but in Missouri, it's Pilot and Casey's, and when you get one that big, they're pretty much for sure they're at an interstate somewhere. So we're about to get on the interstate, and I'm going to get off here and pay more attention to my driving, and I appreciate y'all coming along and listening to me talk, watching the blur go by. There used to be that old song, standing on the corner watching all the blurs go by. No, that was girls, but they were moving slower. So this is all blurs. It's the whole world looks the same. It's all just a big blur, seen at 70 miles an hour, and all the details and all the individualities have been blurred out of it, and most people don't even know it. They haven't seen any details in so long that they don't even realize they're out there and that they're not seeing them. Which is, you have to admit, it's a strange world we live in. And I don't know what it is that makes this seem more pleasant. I would really, if I could take a train to do this, if I could do anything else, then if I could go to this seminar closer to home, I'd like that. Okay, bingo, we're set at 70, and if you look out there, you see that it's all blurs, and there's a semi-trailer truck in front of me and one behind me, and 70 miles an hour isn't fast enough to keep up with traffic on a 70 mile an hour speed limit because faster is better. 77 miles from Columbia. I'll be there before too long. Y'all have a good evening. I'm going bye.